Okay, so in America, um, a lot of people frown upon, hurting animals. Well, I think that it's okay. So to take animals from the wild, along with endangered species or species that can lead to endangerment if you keep getting them, is a big problem. And recently the U.S. has been trying to make laws to state that you can't take animals from their natural habitat. Well, one place that has kept doing this and I believe stopped, but keeps doing it, is SeaWorld. They've taken many orcas, killer whales, dolphins, penguins, really anything that they can find. They took from their natural habitat and put them in captivity in San Diego, which is not the same as they're used to. So I'm going to be talking about um, orcas how orcas have been kidnapped and taken into custody by SeaWorld, how the life expectancy has dropped tremendously, and how orcas have frequently died and have many illnesses that goes untreated. So orcas have been kidnapped and taken into captivity by SeaWorld. So SeaWorld has organizations that fund for them, along as the Alliance of Marine Mammals and aquarium parks, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So these organizations are really big on, aquariums or just wildlife in general, and yet those organizations really never check up into SeaWorld to see if everything is up to date, up to law, and they really never check in and just fund. So in the movie Blackfish, have you guys seen Blackfish? It's a documentary on SeaWorld and how the orcas are treated, how they look. It really dives into how the workers used to perform with orcas. It shows how a lady got killed by Shamu, one of the killer whales. The movie Blackfish shows how a person named John Hargrove almost died when he was working with the killer whales, and it really opened his eyes to see what's going on and how it's very dangerous. So the vice president of communications from Blackfish is named Fred Jackson. He stated that the worker from SeaWorld quickly left and quit his job, and he started joining groups and organizations that go against SeaWorld and try to make everything, just try to take the orcas from captivity and the dolphins and the penguins and everything. So that he went to an organization that tries to shut down SeaWorld because it opened his eyes. Next, I'm talking about how the life expectancy has dropped tremendously. So the years 30 to 50 years, orca killer whales are expected to live. For males, it's 60 to 70 years. For females, it's 80 to 100. In SeaWorld, many of the whales have died on their 12th year, the youngest being 2 years. Many of the animals in the journal Marine Mammal Science on Monday states that 68% of animals in custody have died. That fewer than have died in 6 years. Only 1 out of 8 has died. Only 1 out of 8 has made it past their 30-year expectancy. Next, I'll be talking about how orcas die frequently and have illnesses that go unchecked. So many of the illnesses that orcas have in SeaWorld is that they are forced to do reproduction, that they're forced to make other orcas, and it's very difficult. It's the orca whales, the woman really sometimes she'll fight, and that leads to her dying or not having the orcas. Another thing would be that they group of orcas that really didn't choose each other to be in a group, so many of the males fight for dominance. Another thing would be that being in the tank and being, bored and not used to it, many of the orcas bite on bite on it, and so they drill holes into their teeth that really goes unchecked, so they die of infections in their mouth. Another thing would be that the tank is 12 inches deep, so that really doesn't cover the orcas from, the harsh conditions that can be like the sun or all of that. So a lot of orcas have very bad sunburns, so it leads to like their skin peeling and stuff like that. And instead of treating them, SeaWorld just paints black over it, and they don't really check it at all. Another thing is that the dorsal fins for the males go down, and that's a clear indication of not good health, and that something is very wrong, but SeaWorld states that this is normal, it's natural. So the solutions that we can do to try to make SeaWorld shut down so the wildlife can have better chances of surviving, being taken away to another facility or in wildlife, is that PETA Action Team has this organization that you can join to go to events, rallies, stuff like that, to really support your view of having SeaWorld shut down to make the orcas have a better place. Another place is called chance.org, has many petitions you can do to sign up. And another thing is just not to go to SeaWorld. Just don't go, don't give them money. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm not sure what you were saying in the introduction about animals. That got a little bit confusing. When you get to SeaWorld, you admit that you don't know what their current policy is, what they are doing with the animals, which makes your argument sound like it might be out of sync with what SeaWorld's current practices are. This sounds like a speech about the criticisms that were made in the movie Blackfish, and seems to ignore everything that's happened in the 5 or 6 years subsequent to the release of that movie, including the fact that SeaWorld no longer does a lot of the things that you talked about. They've closed down their performances. They largely have eliminated the orcas in their parks to some degree. I mean, they're still in one park that they're using them. But it's like there's no update of this information. This feels like it's out of context. There needs to be a stronger structure in the speech. You seem to be wandering around on some of the topics that you're talking about. It just seems, and I think you need to come up with a value point to begin with. The suggestion that these animals either deserve special treatment, that we should be looking at them in a particular way, that there is an important reason for us to be worried about the way that they are being treated in the zoos and aquariums, and that's why we ought to be paying attention to this. As it is, it's random complaints about things that have happened at SeaWorld or problems that orcas have. By the way, some of the information doesn't get cited at all. I assume that there's a basis for some of this information, but there's not a source citation that's being presented in any of that, and I found that to be a little bit problematic. I would be careful about quoting anything from PETA. And the very first thing that I looked at when I look at your supporting material, you quote Fred Jacobs and Vice President of Communication. You make it sound like he's a Vice President of Communication for this other group. It says he's really talking about the guy who's become an animal rights extremist after leaving SeaWorld. And this is not an endorsement of him, this was a criticism of him. The quote that you have here says, and has eagerly embraced their habit of misleading the public to advance an agenda. I'm going, so this is an opposition guy to your position, and you're quoting this person to support your position. That was very confusing, and that just happened to be the first piece of information I looked at, and so it's inconsistent with the information that you're presenting here. All right, I'm going to stop there because